want to go over really quick is the assignments for the next 2 weeks. So the first one is, I feel like next week's are like fairly self-explanatory, but model and UV your furniture and decorative objects. So I'm probably not going to be like, I'm not going to lie, I'm not really probably going to look at the UVs unless you're like, I have specific questions about the UVs. I'll just look at the model and see if there's any like weird topology stuff. Ideally, you'd be working ahead though to get stuff done. So definitely, at least finish the models for furniture and decorative. And then begin modeling any additional like filler objects for your scene, like if you have, just like bookshelves or like random clutter. And then add any new objects you have to your scene. So at a minimum, the furniture and decorative object, and ideally whatever filler objects you made. Throw them into your scene and render again. I would like one render for the day lighting and one render for night lighting. And I'd also like you to test different render angles for each of those different lightings. So pick one angle and render it in day lighting, pick a new angle and render it in night lighting, just to kind of play with like the different camera angles you might actually start using for the final. Any questions about that? All right. And then for that, I just want a zip file with your Maya scene and the updated renders of your scene with the new objects in them. And then also just any reference images that you have for modeling the furniture and decorative object, because that is helpful to reference if there's like questions, or I can compare to your actual models. That's pretty much this one. Any questions on this? All right. Other thing that is due next week is the turntable. And that should be just like a continuation pretty much off of that like every 25th frame bit that was due today. So please incorporate any feedback that me or any other people give you on the turntable. So stuff like, hey, your render is like crazy far away and I can't really see your object, or like the lighting is terrifying and half of your thing is black. Please like actually change that stuff if it's like a major impediment to actually, seeing your object. And then basically re-render turntable and also render a wireframe and throw that as an overlay on your turntable. This should take like an extra 10 minutes probably to do. It shouldn't, like if these renders, I can go over these if you guys want. I think I have tutorials like kicking around, but yeah, they should render like super fast. If they don't render super fast, let me know, because probably something has gone horribly wrong. And in terms of like what I expect from the project, from the turntable, specifically for the one with the wireframe, I would like a black outline or white if your object is like super dark and you can't see black. So white or black outline, just over the original renders, like the textured renders that you have. So I don't want to just see like a pure white object with black lines on it. I would like to see, again, the wireframe over the texture, which should just be a matter of taking those wireframe images and throwing them into something like After Effects above your original renders and setting it to be a multiply layer, and that'll pretty much immediately give you that kind of effect that I am asking for here. So again, it shouldn't really require like much of any additional rendering to actually do that. And then pretty much same thing as last week, like, I expect to be able to see your object and have walls and floors and all the stuff that I went over last week still applies for this turntable. I've also relinked to the tutorial about how to actually set up a turntable in case you want to reference that again. But are there any questions on, the requirements for this or like the expectations for that? Yep.
Sorry, how did you say that we can overlay?
I'll show you. I can actually show you a demo. Like, remind me when after we go over the assignments, because it'll be pretty quick. Yeah. And then for the what to submit for this, I just want the 2 video files of just the turntable, one with and one without wireframe. And actually, this one I do not want zipped. It's really easy to just like Blackboard Learn will just automatically load your videos and I can just watch it and learn. If it's a zip file, then I have to download it. So please don't zip this assignment. I'm not gonna lie, that is literally just me being lazy. But yeah, so that's turntable. Questions on turntable? Yep.
What is it a turntable
Oh, it's your hero object. Yeah, so whatever you set up last week, pretty much just render the whole thing. All right, and the other assignment, so both of those, the modeling of the decorative and furniture object, and the turntable are due next Monday when there is no class. The assignment I'm about to go over is the one that is due when we come back on week 9. And that's pretty much just finish populating your scene with random objects. I don't know why this is taking so long to load. Yo, what the heck? All right, well, that's fun. This is super questionable. All right, well, I remember most of the stuff from this, so if it loads, awesome. If it doesn't, I pretty much know what the assignment is. So basically, oh, look, now it loads. Okay. Computers are evil. Yeah, so pretty much just model the rest of your little background objects in your scene. So I was kind of expecting these scenes to be like kind of cluttered depending on what they are. Obviously, if it's something like a hospital, you probably don't want a bunch of stuff laying around on the floor because that's ridiculous. But if it's something like a child's room or like, you know, a super used workspace, it might make sense to have, you know, some clutter here and there. So just add enough to make your scene feel believable and or populated. And I would recommend doing stuff where you can sort of make one object and then easily modify it to become other objects. So like one thing I usually use as an example is if you're making a bunch of different books, you can really easily just, you know, make one book, UV it, and then go through and just sort of like stretch it so it's slightly thicker or like slightly taller and make a just ridiculous assortment of books that way in a fairly easy way. You don't even need to go back and like really do all that much to the UVs. So stuff like that is always good for adding clutters, like things that can be easily repeated. And there's also, I'll go over a little bit of MASH today, and that could potentially be useful for populating your objects depending on, you know, what exactly you're trying to achieve. I would also like you to go through and texture your furniture and decorative objects. And I'm getting a little bit sort of freeform with the work at this point. Like, at a minimum, I would like you to have, you know, some kind of logical color map for your object. The more complete your textures are, the more credit you'll get for that part of the assignment. So, you know, if you have like a fully textured object with like nice specular maps and stuff, obviously that'll get you higher points. It's just like, depending on like the level of complexity and like how many additional objects you need to model, kind of like texture as much as you can on the furniture objects. But ideally, they'd mostly be done. Does that make sense? Kind of like a weird description. All right. Shoot for pretty much finishing everything. I realize that might not be feasible depending on your scene. And then add all of your objects to your scene, so like any of your background objects and your, you know, textured furniture stuff. And again, re-render. The only thing that I'm specifying for this particular one is I would like you to decide on your final render angles or like final-ish render angles. And they're listed right here in this like weird little doc here. But basically like proof your render angles for the final before actually submitting the final, if that makes sense. So like test them out, get feedback on them. If they're like super weird, then you have time to change them before the final. So this is the specifications for said final. And this is what here, the in-environment renders that I mentioned in the week 9 assignment. So basically all I'm looking for is this set of renders basically rendered in both day and night setting. So pick at least one render and have that show off your hero object, because that is like, you know, your showpiece object. I want one render showing that off very clearly in your scene. And then at least one render of your furniture and decorative objects. Then these are the ones that you made, not the ones that your teammates made. They're just sort of like extra filler for your background. So you should be, you know, sharing your models by this point so that they pop up in the scenes. But yeah, so again, one render showing off your hero object and one for your furniture and decorative object. I don't care if that's like one render, if your furniture and decorative thing are like really close to each other. That's totally fine. They both show up in the same render. Good enough for me. And then the other ones are kind of up to you about what, you know, you want to show off in your room. If there's like some really cool lighting or something that you're proud of, or you're like enjoy like a particular corner of your room, you can highlight that with some other renders. But basically take each of these render settings and render them in both your day lighting and your night lighting. So you should have at least 8 renders for this week's assignment. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions on that, I guess, so far? All right. So again, this is mostly just to get you kind of like proofing and thinking about the render angles from the final. All right, and then for like model expectations, ideally you'd at least, for the background objects and stuff, get like some kind of something on them so they're not gray. I'm not gonna be like super stickler about that, honestly. And then if you could just zip me your Maya project folder, including all of the renders that I just mentioned, and any of the like texture files, reference images, Maya files, etc. that you have been using. I would also appreciate if you could like clean up any like random old files that are just like floating around your scene, because at this point usually project folders start getting kind of big and they take a while to download. And again, this is due week 9, so in 2 weeks. Are there any questions about this assignment or any of the other ones that I've gone over? All right. Cool. So if that is the case, I'm going to really quick, I'll show you guys how to do the render of the wireframe objects and just like how to overlay that. If anyone wants to follow along with what I'm doing in class today, I have, hello. By the way, Alt-B, as in boy, will toggle the background color of your Maya window. But I'll be using, under sample models, there's a little folder called mash play. I have like some random files and stuff just like hanging out in there. So if you want to download that and follow along with whatever I'm doing, you're welcome to. In this case, I have the file here. I'm just gonna grab this very awkward little scene that I've made. And so I have renders of this just like hanging out already in the images folder of mash play. So here's this like very weird sort of foggy thing that I've made. I'll show you guys how to do environmental fog at the end of class today, which is how I got these like God ray effects. But I'll just render a wireframe for this since I kind of have it here. So I'm just going to select all of my objects in my scene. I'm going to right click and do, actually, I have this water plane here. I don't know if I want this enough to keep that, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Select all my objects, assign new material, and if you go under the Arnold tab, you want the AI wireframe. And this usually renders like obscenely fast, so if I just go into my render view, yes, I should also, I'm gonna run through real quick and just turn off that environmental fog there, because that should not be showing up. All right, if you don't have environmental fog, this is pretty much what's gonna show up by default for that wireframe render. It's usually just like a white background with gray, or with like black outlines. So you will notice, here's my texture for the wireframe. You can change the color if you want to. I pretty much never do this. I've never found a reason to. I would appreciate it if you could go through and set the edge type. You'll notice like it's triangulated my ground and my grass, and clearly it's not triangulated because I hate triangular meshes. Just set that to polygons. It'll make it quads. But once you have this, like again, you can see this renders like stupidly fast. I'm just gonna save this out real quick. No, summer project. I had to restart the computer between classes and I was salty, and now I have to reset my project. Alright. Huzzah. One more time. Maya, you're the devil. Dear God. Alright. Cool. Alright, so I just saved that out as an image file. I'm going to find said wireframe JPEG that I just made and just dump that on top of my existing scene in Photoshop. I see. So basically what you want to do, and this is, you can do this with multiple frames in After Effects. It's pretty much the exact same process. It's fairly straightforward to figure out. But just like take pretty much all of your, series of nice renders, put that on a layer below your wireframe, and then just set this wireframe layer to be multiply. And you can see that that will go through, and I still see the original texture of the ground in the original render, but now there's just like a wireframe overlaid on top. I think I did do like a strange setting where Ah, yes, that was the thing. So I was looking at this and I'm like, why is the background black? Like that looks super stupid. So I was looking at the alpha in my render view, and I was like, it has an alpha, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I saved it as a JPEG. Of course it's not going to have an alpha in it, and it's going to make me go back to where it was before. So you should save these at least a PNG. .png, or else that alpha is not going to show up, and then you're going to get this weird black nonsense in the back of your renders if you don't have anything there. So in this case, I'm going to show for my actual wireframe that I want, and again, just set that layer to be multiply, and then you have pretty much the wireframe that I'm asking for. Does that make sense? Cool. You can also, if you need to, you can, while you're in Maya, go through and adjust the line width. So if you're like, hey, that's like super hard to see, you can kind of thicken things or thin things as you need to. But that's more or less how to actually put the wireframes on. So again, it should be fairly fast to render these out. If it takes more than like 15 minutes to do the entire turntable, like there's probably something that's gone horribly wrong. Any questions on that? All right, perfect. Cool. So that's pretty much all the assignment stuff.